Okay, so welcome to Mishlei shiur. Okay, so there's three ways to start a Mishlei shiur from the beginning. One is to start from the beginning of the book. The other is to do a hakdama, and then the third way is to jump right into the middle. So I figure you're already doing the hakdama with Rabbi Zimmer's Mishlei shiur, so you got that covered. And then I'm giving a Mishlei community shiur tonight, and I plan on doing the Sadi Gon's hakdama. So if you're interested in like a formal hakdama, then we'll do that. For this year, I figure we'll start by jumping right into the middle, okay? And by middle, I mean like actually right in the middle. Quick overview of the structure of Mishlei here. So you have, the way I think of it is sometimes I go 4 or 5 sections of Mishlei. It doesn't, it's not exact, but chapters 1 through 9 are the introductory chapters. And that begins with the phrase Mishlei Shlomo. Okay, chapters 10 through 24 is the first section of what I call normal Mishlei, which also starts with Mishlei Shlomo, and then chapters 25 through 29 is the third section of normal, or is the second section of normal Mishlei, the third section in the book, and that's the Mishlei Shlomo that were copied down by the Anshe Chizkiyahu, which are the same genre as like the middle part of Mishlei, but the style is slightly simpler and different. Then you've got like the weird end prakim from like 30 until halfway through 31. That's the fourth section of Mishlei. I don't exactly know what the definition of that is, but it starts off with a new intro of Divrei Agur bin Yakeh, and then you've got Eishes Chayil at the very end, which is the last half of the 31st chapter, which is the conclusion of Mishlei. So in this class, in this year, we're going to be doing normal Mishlei. So basically, anything is gained from chapter 10 through chapter 29. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to start from chapter 18, pasuk 2. Okay, and the reason why we're starting from there is it doesn't matter where we start. You can, there's no continuity or connection between the psukim. Sometimes you'll get a cluster of like 2 or 3 psukim that are related, but there's no like order within the middle of the book. I think we mentioned that earlier. And the reason why I wanted to start with chapter 18, but 18:1 is such an atypical pasuk that I don't want our first shiur to be on that. And so we're going to start with 18:2 and then go forward from there. The methodology we're going to use is as follows. Okay, so this is like basic learning methodology, but in Mishlei, the way I think of it is that there are 5 phases. Okay, phase 1 is translation. Okay, normally that is a straightforward endeavor, but Shlomo HaMelech intentionally wrote Mishlei with incorporating ambiguities and multiple ways of reading into the pasuk in order to both make you think. That's one of the stated goals of the book, is lahavin imrei bina, to teach you how to analyze statements of understanding, and number 2, to incorporate multiple ideas within each pasuk, so you can read it in different ways and get different ideas. So it's like a multi-purpose proverb. The other thing he also did is, let's skip that. Okay, so this step 1 is translating the pasuk. Step 2 is we raise all of the questions and problems on the pasuk that we can think of, even if they're obvious. And I mean, this is I think this is an obvious question. Why should we raise every question even though it's obvious?
Still got to answer it.
Okay, number 1, you got to answer it, right? But let's say like I feel like there's a certain feeling that people get where like, well, we don't really need to actually verbalize the question.
I mean, sometimes verbalizing it allows deeper understanding of noticing that you didn't initially notice.
Right. Okay, good. So I think the purpose of asking even the obvious questions is to highlight them, to get your mind to work on them. And if you just kind of take the question for granted, then it's easy to overlook it. And also, there's an art in formulating the question, and the way you formulate the question could lead your mind into different ways. The questioning phase has to be complete before you start interpretation. The most common mistake in Mishlei methodology, I think, for new Mishlei students is they immediately start to interpret the pasuk. And this is another pitfall, which is that if your mind immediately jumps to a line of thinking and you start pursuing it before you've identified all the questions, then there's a chance that you're going to miss something. Either that you're going to actually overlook a question, or that you're not going to weight the question properly. So stage 1, translation. Stage 2, questions and problems. Stage 3 is the brainstorming phase. That's when we try to answer particular questions or to come up with a unifying explanation of the pasuk that answers all the questions, in one shot. So that's like stage 3. Stage 4 is testing our theory, okay, which is stage 3 is brainstorming. Stage 4 is coming up with a theory and presenting it and formulating it in full. And then stage 5 is testing the theory, which is, does it flow from the words of the pasuk, or are you cramming it in? Is the idea that you came up with consistent with your other knowledge? I mean, is it consistent with Torah? Is it consistent with with the rest of Mishlei? And most importantly, like, is it true? Is the idea true? Like, you come up with a very fancy, nice sounding idea, but then it just doesn't correlate with actual real life experience, or like it's or it's got some sort of mistake in it. Okay, so those are the 5 stages. And like, the nature of Mishlei is that you're going to flow in between the different the different stages. Like, you might translate, ask questions, start to come up with an idea, and then realize that you missed something in the translation and go back. So that's our brief overview of the method, okay? Any questions on that? Yeah.
Yeah, can you just say it one more time,
Stage 1 is translation. Stage 2 is questions and problems. Stage 3 is brainstorming and like throwing around ideas. Stage 4 is formulating a main idea or definitive explanation. And stage 5 is testing the main idea, testing it against the words, testing it against the rest of your knowledge, and testing it against reality.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start. We're going to start with 18.2. Okay, I have Mikros Gedolos here, which I'll pass out after we do the first stage. I think it's I think it's very easy to prejudice your mind. So if you can, just look at the Hebrew. Like, I've got on Zoom here, just the Hebrew there. Okay, and then we'll branch out into the Maharshim as we go. Okay. And also, just if you're looking up Mishlei and Tanakh, the place that it appears is before Eov and after Tehillim. That's the typical place. Okay, so lo yachpot ksil bitvuna ki im bihizgalos libo. Okay, so any initial attempts to translate this? And remember, if you feel like there's an ambiguous term, it's usually because there is. Okay, usually ambiguous in translation, ambiguous in terms of syntax.
I would translate it. Ksil does not desire in. I always unclear how to translate tuna, like discernment.
Yeah, I think so. So tavuna, of all the knowledge terms, I think tavuna is the most consistent. So I know our scroll likes the word discernment. I prefer understanding, but yeah. So let's do understanding for now.
Yeah. So a ksil does not desire in understanding, except for, I'd say, to reveal his heart. In the revealing of his heart.
Okay, good. Yeah, okay. So that's a good little translation. I noticed twice you read the word ksil and didn't translate it. Was that intentional?
Semi-intentional. I also have like an understanding of what ksil is, and like at least to some extent.
Okay, so if you had to translate it though, how would you translate it?
Literally, I would translate it full.
Just translate it. Yeah, full. Okay, right. So this is going to be one of the features of Mishlei is the phrase. I guess this is racist now. That there are Eskimos have 50 words for snow. Right? It's not Eskimos. The non-racist race is Inuits, but no one would know what I meant if I said Inuit. So Eskimos have 50 words for snow. That's because they live in a world of snow, and like you need a larger vocabulary to capture the subtleties of everything. So Shlomo has 50 words for fool. Okay, not literally 50, but he in Mishlei, one of the things that Mishlei does is he diagnoses different types of foolishness and has different names associated with them. So we'll translate any term like that as fool with an understanding that we have to arrive at a technical definition. Okay, so let's just go through. I think that was a pretty good initial translation. So I'm gonna go through and just highlight the ambiguities in the translation here. Okay, so lo yachpots. Now you said lo yachpots ksil bitvuna. So the ksil does not yachpot, and Isaac, you translate it as desire, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are 2 translations for chafetz. One is desire, and the other one is.
Think of a synonym for
object.
think the same thing, right?
Right. And this one is kind of closely related to desire.
Okay.
What did you say? You said object. I think in
object.
Hebrew it's an object like a hefza. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a later usage though. So chafetz either means to desire or to take pleasure in, okay, or to delight in, okay. So that's one ambiguity, okay. Then when you've got lo and ki'im, okay. So when you translated it, Isaac, you translated it straight, right? Lo yachpotz ksil b'tvuna. The fool doesn't desire or delight in understanding. And then how do you translate ki'im?
I said except for.
Except for, right? So that's the literal translation, and that's totally fine, right? But then sometimes when you got lo and ella or lo and ki'im, then you translate it as what? Like that pairing, lo dot 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 ella or lo dot 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 ki'im.
Rather?
Only.
Only, right? Yeah, only, right? So the fool only desires understanding bihis galos libo. Okay. Now on the surface, those kind of sound similar, right? But there may be a difference, which is why we have to call our attention to it. All right. So then we've got the weirdness. I noticed you struggle with the weirdness also of bitvuna, right? Because what would you expect it to say? Lo yachpotz tvuna, right? The fool doesn't desire understanding, but bitvuna, is that just an idiom? Is that like, is that intentional? I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, the way I just like naturally, like my mind went when the Bays was there.
Yeah.
He doesn't have, so to speak, logical desires. Like he doesn't desire with understanding.
Okay, right. So meaning his desire is not characterized by understanding, or is not via understanding. Okay, good. Yeah, that's certainly a way to approach it also. And then ki'im is only, or rather, bihis galos libo. So his galos, you translated, Isaac, as revealing, in revealing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I think that's a good translation to work with here, right? Just noting here, his galos is in hispael, right? Or sorry, it's at least, it seems reflexive. Again, I'm not a grammar guy, so I don't know, but that was what jumped out to me. And then libo, his heart. Heart means typically one of two things in Tanakh, right?
Your desire or your mind.
Desire or your mind, right? So that's another ambiguity here. Okay, so we've got plenty of ambiguities in the translation here.
Yeah.
All right.
In terms of it meaning desire, it's not like not necessarily a conscious desire. It's like a deeper desire, right?
You're talking for heart, you mean?
Yeah.
Good question. Not sure. Yeah.
Like let's say talking about how someone a seal like strength or something. Would it use, like if it was talking about like that desire, would it use the word lave?
I don't know. And this is something that we have to be wary of when we learn. Like, for example, you acknowledged, Isaac, that when you said ksil, that you already have an understanding of ksil going in. So this is the delicate art of learning Mishlei with fresh eyes, but having knowledge prior, which is we might be walking with preconceived notions. And the goal is to try to approach the pasuk fresh and let the pasuk speak to you on its own terms. And you can always afterwards, after you get an idea, go back and compare it to what you knew before, but there's a danger of plugging in prior understandings, and like it's a judgment call. Like, let's say for example, tvuna, right? So like we're gonna try as much as we can to extract a meaning from the pasuk, but maybe we'll have to make recourse to a prior understanding and like plug it in. There's a give and take. The problem is if you aren't aware that you're doing that, and if you're just plugging in definitions, so then you're not actually gonna like learn new fundamental ideas. You're just going to be recycling old ideas or just getting like new variations. Maybe this is teaching you a new definition of lave. Maybe this is teaching you a new definition of ksil or a new definition of tvuna, So that wasn't a rebuke. That was just we should be aware of this. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So now we've translated the pasuk loosely, right? We've got lots of ambiguities here. So what are the questions we're going to need to answer? And, I like to think of things in terms of major questions and minor questions. The major questions are the ones that if you don't answer, you can't say, I got the idea in the pasuk. And then the minor ones are, okay, like it's a good question, but if I don't answer it, then I'm not going to lose sleep over it. For example, let's say yachpot means desire, right? So what else could it have said in terms of yachpot if it wanted to say the verb for desire? Yeah, right. It could have used ta'ava, right? So lo yis'aveh ksil b'tvuna. So it is a question. Why does it say Yachbot and not Yisaveh? But that's a minor question. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. One of the things you'll find in Mishlei is all of the Mefarshim except for the Malbim and Rav Hirsch are comfortable saying that Mishlei uses synonyms. Okay, Malbim and Rav Hirsch are the only ones who say, no, Davka, if he uses Chafetz, then that's like essential to the idea. And that's part of the derech of the Malbim and the derech of Rav Hirsch, which is why I typically don't use them in Mishlei, not because their ideas are not good, but because they have their whole system where they've gone through all of Tanakh and like they have set definitions for everything. And we want a much more like organic approach to Mishlei where we're learning it from the pasuk and figuring it out on our own. Oh, I forgot to mention that also. Yeah, before 1 second, Arya. I forgot to mention this also. Another hallmark of our derech here is we learn the pasuk on our own, try to come up with as much of an understanding as we can, and then we go to the Mefarshim. Okay, and that is, I think you should do that in every area, but specifically in Mishlei, Shlomo wrote Mishlei for 4 primary audiences. It says this in the beginning of Mishlei. Laseis lepasayim arma, to give cunning or cleverness to pasayim, to however you want to translate that, art school like simpletons, gullible fools. Lenar das umazima, to give knowledge and strategy or cleverness. Again, another word for like cleverness to the youth. Yishma chacham v'yosef lekach, the chacham will hear and he will acquire learning. V'navon tachbulos yichne, and the understanding person will acquire strategies. So you see, he specifies 4 audiences: the pesi, the na'ar, the chacham, and the navon. And however you define these terms, it's pretty clear that pesi and na'ar are like the lower end of the cognitive development spectrum, and chacham and navon are the higher end. So what this means is that Mishlei can be learned by all 4 of these people on different levels. So you can say, for example, that like you can't learn the Navi Yechezkel without Mefarshim, or you can't learn like Daniel without Mefarshim. Like a person could say that, and I can understand it. Mishlei was specifically meant to be understood or understandable by these 4 categories of people, and including youths and simpletons. So we should be able to learn it on our own, and then we check our understanding against the Mefarshim and compare and contrast. It's possible to come up with original interpretations, happens all the time, but like you want to make sure that you're not just like projecting your own ideas into the pasuk, and the Mefarshim are a good check for that. Yeah, Ariel? Unless you are not at liberty to unmute now. Well, go ahead and interrupt me.
I have a question. So why would a seal not want tefuna? Okay,
so question 1: why would a seal not want tefuna? And then again, this is where the translation comes in. Yeah, so what do you say?
Who says that's true?
Right. So this depends on how you read it, right? So if it says lo yach pots ksil betuna, he doesn't want understanding. Ki im b'his galos libo, he only wants the revealing of his heart. So then the question stands. But if you say he only wants understanding in revealing his heart, so then you'd have to modify the question somewhat, which is, why is his desire for understanding qualified by b'his galos libo? Yeah, Ariel, what were you saying?
Yeah, so can you just translate the question one more time? I don't have it in front of me.
Sure. So, again, the translation is a little ambiguous, but the ksil only desires understanding in revealing his heart, or the ksil doesn't desire understanding except in revealing his heart. And then desire could either mean desire or delight. Libo can either mean his heart. It means his heart. It could either mean his emotions or his mind.
It's the ksil?
Ksil, yeah, the fool, which we need to define. That's going to be another question. What is a ksil?
So the fool only desires what's in his heart, and the second one was the second phrase is what?
So the ksil doesn't desire understanding, but only in revealing his heart, or the ksil only desires understanding in revealing his heart. Okay. So just to reiterate the questions here. So why doesn't he desire understanding, or why does he only desire understanding in revealing his heart? That's going to be the main question. Desire/delight in. What else do we need to define or ask?
What does this whole thing even mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
The whole thing is just.
Yeah. Right. That's going to be a question we can always ask here. Is like, what is it saying? And you'll find there's like two it's not so clear all the time, but there's like two types of Mishlei Psukim. There's the ones that you read it and the danger is it seems obvious. And then there's the Mishlei Psukim where you read it and you're like, I have no idea what it's saying, And sometimes like different people have different intuitions on those. Right, so we need to define what a ksil is. We need to explain what it means behis galos libo. Like that's another major question here. And then there's a couple questions that like that I think are good to get yourself into the habit of always asking on every pasuk, even if it seems obvious. One question is, what is the subject of the pasuk? And by that I mean every pasuk in Mishlei deals with a specific area of decision making or a specific scenario, and sometimes you'll think you got it clear, but then when you ask yourself this question, what's the subject? Then that forces an additional level of clarity. Another question that is always good to ask, at least according to my approach, I can't say the same for Rabbi Zimmer's, is I learned Mishlei as a book about practical decision making. So every pasuk has to have a practical application, and it might not have one, it might have many, but the question is, what's the practical relevance of this pasuk, or what's the practical application here? Okay, then we also have to ask, yeah, go ahead, Isaac.
What do you mean, what is the subject?
So let's say, for example, I'll give you an example from yesterday. So yesterday I was learning a pasuk in Mishlei, and it was talking about an ineffective way for a person to present his case to a judge. Okay, and the Mefarshim were split. Is this pasuk giving you advice on how to present your case before a judge, or is it giving the judge advice on how to evaluate a person's claim? Okay, so those are two separate subjects, right? One is advice for presenting your case. The other is warning for how to judge people's cases, And if you didn't ask that question, you might walk away without a clear idea of what the pasuk is talking about.
Okay, so the subject, you mean subject in terms of topic, not subject in terms of like audience.
Right, but that itself is another good question. Who is the audience of this pasuk? Who's the pasuk intended for? So like, let's say like in the example I just gave, is this pasuk talking to the judge or is it talking to the litigant? This case here, is our pasuk talking? Well, what would be one obvious thing of who the pasuk's talking to?
Definitely ksil.
Ksil.
Right. So he's the only person who shows up in the pasuk. But it's entirely possible that this is not talking to the ksil. Who might it be talking to? Like, even though we don't know the idea yet. The chacham, right? It might be talking to someone who is like in the presence of a ksil or interacting with a ksil or teaching a ksil, Yeah. So that's another question that's good to always ask is who's the audience of the pasuk?
Right. Also, I think in general, when you have like this type of thing, that this is how a ksil acts.
Yeah.
You could always say in a certain sense that's speaking to anyone.
Yeah.
Because if you see yourself doing these type of things, you might not be as smart as you thought.
Right, exactly.
Ksil-ish tendency.
Exactly. So that's another yesod in Mishlei here, which is that, I mentioned Shlomo coined all these terms. There's no such thing as like a pure ksil, right? Like someone who's 100% unadulterated ksil. And there's no such thing as a perfect chacham. There's no such thing as a perfect tzaddik. Shlomo works in archetypes, these idealized personalities of Mishlei, because from a teaching perspective, it's a lot easier to take an oversimplified paradigm and then think about that, like same thing like when you're looking, studying any art, like let's say like you're a basketball player, right? So you always think in terms of what would the ideal basketball player do. It doesn't help you to think about what would the real life person do. That step comes later when you're trying to like apply this to practicality. But when you're thinking about the ideas, you should think about the pure specimen. Right. So yeah, Ariel?
What did you mean that this pasuk, like a pasuk could be speaking to a specific audience?
Yeah. So some psukim are meant for a general audience, but some psukim are giving advice to a specific person or a person in a specific situation, and that's why you always have to ask the question. Like, let's say, for example. Again, in that pasuk I just gave, which I intentionally didn't say the pasuk because I don't want to influence your ideas there. But if the pasuk was talking to a person and telling them how to present their case to a judge, so that's a very different audience than talking to the judge and saying, be careful when you're judging people's cases to not misjudge them like this. You know, so those are, depending on which audience you choose, you're going to get a different idea.
Right. Maybe I'm confusing something. Maybe you can help me clarify something. There's like sometimes when we learn like Pirkei Avos, you know, at least with Rabbi Markowitz, like, you know, like I was under the impression that he always wants to have like a svara that would speak to the entire Klal Yisrael.
Right. So this is even yeah.
No, I'm finished.
This is even a question in Pirkei Avos, right? And this is a machlokas, you know, Rishonim in Pirkei Avos, that you have some who say, like the Rambam in the Pirush Mishnayos, that Pirkei Avos is intended specifically for dayanim, right? That the entire Pirkei Avos is not aimed at the average person; it's aimed at dayanim. You know, there's an indication in the Gemara. It says if you want to become a chassid, you should be Makayim the Milei de Avos. Chassid is someone who's going lifnei mishur sadin, who's going beyond the letter of the law. So let's say when I teach Pirkei Avos, that's how I teach it. It's davka not for all people. It's primarily aimed at people who are trying to go beyond the letter of the law. Now that doesn't mean that other people can't gain from it, but I think it does mean that if you don't take that into account when you're learning it, then you might make a mistake. Like my favorite example from that is there's a mission in Pirkei Avos that says, Aseh Torascha Keva. Wait, I know that it does say that. I'm just trying to remember what the Mishnah is that I'm talking about.
It's Aleph Tisvav.
Okay, that's that one, right? But is there another one that sounds like that?
Yeah, there's like a few different ones that sound like that. Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Anyways, I forgot what the Mishnah was, but I just remember Rashi. So Rashi learns it that you should not be koveya itim laTorah. You should always be learning Torah. Okay, so if you take that Rashi and you assume that the Mishnah is giving advice for the average person, that's disastrous, right? I mean, according to halacha, you should be koveya itim laTorah. And if an average person tried to learn all the time, so then that would be detrimental to his learning. But if you're taking it to be talking specifically to a high-level dayan in Klal Yisrael, you know, or someone who's going lifnei mishur sadin, so if that person were to be koveya itim, that would be bad for his learning because then he'd be restricting it to certain times, you know. So this is why, like, I mean, again, I'm sure Rabbi Markowitz has his own approach to Mishlei, to Pirkei Avos, but like depending on what audience you take, you know, then you're going to get a different idea sometimes. Or let's say, like I just saw over Shabbos, the Sforno divides up the Mishnayos divides up the prakim and says certain prakim are talking to the dayanim, certain prakim are talking to everybody. You know, so. And this is a question, Ariel, I think like for all methodology, I mean, I tried to bring this across in my Rama Bakush here, is the question of who is the intended audience or who are the intended audiences is always a question that should be asked. Because depending on what your assumptions are about the audience, you might interpret the words differently.
Oh, I see. So meaning like it's just a machlokas in methodology.
It's a machlokas no, I think everyone agrees to the methodology that you should, you know, that it's written for a certain audience. It might be a general audience, but it's written with an audience in mind. And then the machlokas is within each sefer or each text, who is it written for? You know, that's where you're going to have machlokas.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I don't know if Rabbi Markowitz always explains things.
Halacha or Mishnah, because I'm curious to know how Rabbi Markowitz.
Yeah, sure. If you remind me later, I'll try to remember right after this year. But if I forget, then just remind me.
If you touch that, that'd be awesome. Thank
Yeah,
you.
sure. Yeah, Isaac, what were you saying?
So I don't know if Rabbi Markowitz would say that every Mishnah is like intended for a general audience.
Okay.
Like based on my own like recollection, I don't recall him ever saying that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if he's like I don't remember any particular examples one way or another where he like specifically was explaining the limit, but it didn't seem to me like that's how he was approaching.
Okay, so we can ask that, but the main principle I'm interested here is just being aware of the question of audience, you know, and like even let's say like even if you don't hold by a specific audience that this is written for a specific audience, there are certain ideals. Like let's say for example we have a choice between learning a pasuk that it applies to everybody, in a very expansive way, or learning pasuk that it applies to a very specific situation. You know, like there's a certain intuition that a person will have that will draw them in one direction over the other. You know, so it's a good idea to be aware of these methodological considerations. Okay, so let's move on now. I think we've listed the main questions. Let's just go over them one more time. So what does it mean that the fool doesn't desire understanding, or what does it mean that he only desires understanding in revealing his heart? What does it mean revealing his heart? What is ksil? What is understanding? And what's the subject? Who's the audience? And what's the practical application or practical applications of this? Okay, so now we're in the brainstorm phase. Okay, so this is where we try to come up with either answers to specific questions or try to come up with an explanation that answers everything. And this, you just got to follow your intuition here. So what do you guys say?
What's our active translation?
So let's for now go with only. Okay, because I think that's the most probable translation. You know, but I'm open to others. Okay, so the fool only desires understanding in revealing his lave.
Practical application would be that Chacham seeks understanding in everything.
Okay, good. So this is another yisod of Mishlei, right? Which is that you'll find the majority of psukim explicitly are structured with opposites. It will say in one half the Chacham does this, and the other half the fool does that, or the tzaddik does this, and the rasha does that. Some psukim don't explicitly state the opposite, and in those cases we have to infer what the opposite is. So what Mati's saying is, the fact that it says the fool only desires understanding in revealing his heart implies that the Chacham desires understanding, you know, just in general, or like not confined by this constraint here. So now we've got something to work with, right? We've got a Chacham and a ksil. So now this sharpens our ability to think about the question, why is the fool's desire for understanding restricted to this? And why would the Chacham's desire for understanding not be limited to this?
What does revealing his heart even mean?
Exactly,
Like,
right?
That's the main question.
Yeah.
But it's hard to like think of what this is saying without having.
Right. Well, we already have a step though, right? His heart is either going to be, desire/emotions or mind. So do either of those strike you as a more probable reading, or can you come up with an explanation for both of them?
Just like a first thought.
Yeah.
It seems like it's saying that the fool only wants understanding for his own benefit in a particular sense. I don't know what that benefit is.
Right.
But that's what it sounds to me like the pasuk is saying.
Yes, I think that's a good inference, and I think that fits with both translations of Yachpot as desire or delight. Like he takes pleasure in it when it involves hisgalos libo, and hisgalos libo, like you're saying, is like certainly a personal thing, you know. So let's go back to that question of lave, right? So what strikes you as having meaning? That revealing his emotions or revealing his mind?
It seems more like emotions.
Okay, so what would that mean then? That he only desires understanding in revealing his emotions?
Meaning, insofar as the understanding is in line with what he wants.
Yeah.
Then he wants the understanding.
Okay, so this is certainly a truth about even though we haven't defined ksil yet, we can certainly recognize this thing where like there are certain people who are only interested in knowledge when it confirms their pre-existing prejudices, right? Confirmation bias is what we call it, right? When you leap to seizing upon information that is already in line the way that you think or you feel, and then you neglect or ignore or downplay information that is not like that. So that's definitely a possibility. My question on that would be, what does it mean in hisgalos, in revealing? Right? Like if it said something like, lo yachvotz ksil betuna im ma shebalibo, you know, I could be more open to that, but the gilui, the revelation, the exposing. So that's another definition, right? Is a gilui means either to expose or reveal or to manifest, right? So like I can see your interpretation fitting into that, but it is a little weird. It's a little weird of a word choice of the hiskalos. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying like
yeah, that makes yeah.
Yeah.
Could it be something that maybe I'm thinking like his galos libo is like that he's expressing himself.
Yeah.
That he's speaking.
Yeah.
So he only desires understanding maybe from other people. Like he has no interest in general understanding, anything like that.
Yeah.
Except for when he's the one speaking and he's the one expressing himself.
Yeah. Okay,
then all
good.
of a sudden he cares about attention and thought.
Okay, good. So what is that? So now let's go back to what Mati said is how do you contrast that to the chacham and his desire for understanding?
He desires understanding for himself even when someone else is speaking.
Okay.
And just always.
Okay. Right. So it's not limited to just when he is how do you say it again? How are you now interpreting his galas libo for the seal?
Expressing his...
Expressing. Yeah, okay, right. Okay, good. So, in the interest of time, not that we have to stick to a pace of one pasuk per session, but I think since this is the first session, I would feel bad if we walked away without an idea. So let me just, let me pass one of those to Mati. So I just want to show you two interpretations here that are, I think, either in line with each other or they're just very similar to each other. So look at Mitzudas David at the bottom right. Okay. So he says, bitvuna, lahosif bina al mashabiado. So what does it mean? So tvuna means to increase understanding on what he already has. Okay. So he's not defining tvuna. He's just saying like, he only wants new understanding. Okay. Bis galos lahashmiya larabim ma'at chachma shabiado, to proclaim or to make heard to the masses the little chachma in his hand, lihis pa'erba, to glorify himself with, right? So what's Mitzudas David saying his galos libo means?
He's expressing his wisdom.
Right. For what purpose though?
To glorify himself.
To show off, right? To glorify himself, right? So the chacham's interest, I mean, again, he's not talking about the chacham, but the chacham's interest in tevuna is for the sake of the understanding itself, right? Whether lishma or shelo lishma, in terms of like, let's say like it could be practicality, but it's not egotistical in nature. So the ksil wants it in order to show off, which you can see right away is going to, how is that going to affect the way that he learns? Or that he talks in learning? Like what practical ways is that going to restrict or limit or confine him that the chacham would not contend with?
He's not going to want to listen to other people.
Just 1 second, Ariel. Just Isaac said something first. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not going to want to listen to other people. He's not going to. He's not going to be. He's not going to like be willing to like be wrong about something.
Okay, good. So in fact, hold on to those two thoughts for 1 second. Yeah, Ariel, what did you say?
I was gonna say that the difference in learning styles would just be for the fool. He's gonna be tying everything back to him.
Yeah. Okay, good.
He's like the center of like the world, but the chacham is gonna be more of almost anything.
Okay, good. So let's, in line with what both Ariel and Isaac are saying, look at the Rבינו Yona. So this is right above the Mitzudas David. It is, but on the left column, the bottom. Lo yachapotz ksil betvuna k'im bihis galos libo. Kasher yidaber haksil b'chachma, when the fool speaks in wisdom, lo yachapotz lahavin, hold on, I gotta turn the page here. Lo yachapotz lahavin uladas ha'emes. He does not desire he does not desire to understand and to know the truth. Ki'im lihis pa'er ulagalos libo ve'omek machshavto. But only to glorify and to reveal his mind and the depth of his thought. Now, I think depth of thought here we can, take as like with Rבינו is going finger quotes here, because I don't think he actually has deep thought necessarily. But like he wants to show off how deep of a thinker he is. Al Cain, therefore, so I think he says what Isaac said, lo yazin l'divrei zulaso, so he will not listen carefully to the words of another. V'lo yisyashev alehem, and he will not sit on them or sit with them, like he won't like ponder them. V'zos tiyeh lo le'aid ki lo yachpotz b'tevuna. And this will be as a testimony about him that he does not desire understanding. Because if he wanted it, yakshiv l'divrei chaverav, he would listen very carefully to the words of his friend. V'yisyashiv b'hem, and he would contemplate them. V'yishkalim b'moznei tzedek, and he would weigh them on the scales of his mind. Scales of logic, lama'an yamod ha'emes, in order to arrive at the truth. Ki barov hadas yishlam hamechkar, because through an abundance of knowledge, then analysis is completed or perfected. So both of these are saying the same thing. Rבינו, the Metzudas David is putting the emphasis on just the explanation of the pasuk, whereas Rבינו Yona is explaining the practical ramifications. So we have here, let's just try to state the main idea, and we can come back to this tomorrow just to either see another approach or explore this some more. But the seal only wants understanding when it results in self-glorification, okay? Therefore, it's going to cause him to not listen to what other people have to say, because that doesn't glorify him. In fact, he actually has a disincentive to listen to other people, right? Not just that he's not interested in, but why is he like...
Because at any given time, someone might say something which goes against his...
Right, someone might say something that goes against what he thinks, and that's going to like impinge on his kavod. Someone else might steal the limelight if they say a better idea. So he's just not interested in listening to what they have to say. And he... Now, here's the thing, okay? And this is where we have to like bring this through. Let's ask the who cares question. So what? So what's going to be the consequence of this? So number one, the real consequence is it's going to be limited knowledge, right? He's not going to gain as much knowledge, and that's what Rבינו Yona emphasizes. His investigation will not be complete. But one of the things that I love about Mishlei is Mishlei will show how if you are a fool and you're pursuing a certain objective, you won't even get what you want. Okay, and this, I'm not saying that this is in every pasuk, but what have we said is the Ksil's primary motive for being involved in knowledge? Ego. So how is this going to harm him in his own framework? Do you think?
I mean, he'll also miss out on things that do inflate his ego. That's definitely true.
Okay. Can we go further? In other words, like he wants to be viewed as a deep thinker. So how is this consequence?
He should listen all the time.
Exactly.
And then people go, oh, this guy's smart.
Exactly, right? And then it was like this. So he only is interested in understanding to glorify his ego. And the irony, what I call the Mishlei Mida Keneged Mida, is because he doesn't actually listen to other people, so he's not going to gain as much, and he will make more mistakes. He will embarrass himself more when he's trying to proclaim his deep thinking. You know, he will miss out on the opportunity to actually gain more. And that's the argument that Shlomo is making is, look, buddy, if you want the reputation as a chacham, what should you do if you want? Just forget lishma. What should you do if you want the reputation and people to view you as wise? Listen to people and actually like try to hear everyone out, and then you'll actually get what you want. So it ends up being two things. Number one is the chacham gains real knowledge, and he doesn't find himself in a situation where his own ignorance is exposed. The ksil who wants reputation does not get real knowledge, and he doesn't even get a good reputation because it's evident to everyone that this guy just, the guy who speaks up in a shiur just because he wants to hear himself talk, and he doesn't listen to what anyone else is saying, So that's that. I believe that answers all of our questions, and then we'll end after that.
And how are we learning the phrase "hiskalos libo"?
So I would say let's now go to the translation, right? So lo yachpotz ksil b'tumah im hiskalos libo. The ksil only desires understanding when in revealing his mind, right, or revealing his thoughts. I think his mind is actually better, right? Because he wants to show off his mind. Showing off actually is better. The ksil only desires understanding in showing off his own mind. That's how I would translate the pasuk. And we said the reason why is because he wants the glory of being viewed as a chacham. And by the way, you see from here, a ksil might actually have intellectual capabilities. It's not like he's a dummy. It's just that his motive and his relationship to knowledge is constricted by his desire for self-glorification, And we said the practical consequence. So what's the subject? Subject is the ksil's motive for learning and its self-defeating nature, that he wants to be involved in learning so that people will view him as a chacham, and that itself is going to be, he's going to end up self-sabotaging because he's not actually going to be perfecting his mind, Yeah, I think that answers all the questions. Okay, so that's our first pasuk of Mishlei for today. All right.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think tomorrow what we'll do is